Welcome everyone to another week of Ramban ala Parsha. This week we have the schus to read Parshas Toldos. And Parshas Toldos, I guess the main story obviously in Parshas Toldos is the brachos and Yaakov getting the brachos from Esav. Mostly we did that last year, so I'm going to try to avoid it this year, even though it's a fantastically interesting Ramban on that area, and happy for people to listen to last year's shir. But I want to focus today, at least a little bit, on the role of Yitzchak Avinu. Yitzchak Avinu is certainly in contemporary biblical commentaries doesn't fare that well. The idea is that, he just followed his father. Yaakov did something different. Avram did something different. Yitzchak less so. There is support for that. But I think the Ramban in one or two places this week seems to emphasize the importance of Yitzchak, something we might not have seen otherwise. Right? The parsha begins, Eila Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham, right? The whole purpose of the parsha is to talk about the importance of Yitzchak. And then you go to Pasuk Perek Chavav, Pasuk Gimel. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Yitzchak Avinu, Gur ba'aretz hazot ve'ayeh imcha v'avarcheka ki l'chol zarecha atenet kol haratzot ha'el v'hakimoti et hashivua asher nishbati la'Avram avicha. And I will keep the shivua, the oath that I took to Avram Avinu. Says the Ramban, v'hakimoti et hashivua. Ein tzarich sheyavtiach HaKadosh Baruch Hu at Yitzchak shelo ya'avor hashivua asher nishba la'aviv. Says the Ramban, there's no need for God to tell Yitzchak, oh, and don't worry, I'm going to uphold the oath that I took to Avram, your father. Ki lo adam hu li nachem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not a person, he doesn't change his mind. If he made a shvuah, he's going to keep his word. Va'avraham ein lo zera acher ba'al brit leilokim. Ramban kind of fudges the point. Va'avraham ein lo zera acher. Of course, he does have zera acher. He's Yishmael. But he says, Baal Brit Leilokim. Okay, but Avram doesn't have another child who is worthy of the covenant with God. Baal Brit Elokim is kind of a key line. Okay, now, V'hashivua einana al tanai. And the oath that God took to Avram wasn't contingent on anything. Ki bi Yaakov hutrach mipnei Esav achiv lomar shabo yitkaim habrit uvizaro lo be'esav. With respect to Yitzchak Avinu, who had two sons and two potential inheritors of the bracha. So you had to say, okay, I'm giving it to Yaakov Avinu and not to Esav. But not here. And says the Ramban then, V'nira, shezeh ha'ma'amar v'hakimoti et hashivua yechashev shivua. This idea of HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying v'hakimoti et hashivua, says the Ramban, it is a shvua to Yitzchak Avinu. Ulekach tamid yomar bat Torah haaretz asher nishbati la'Avraham liYitzchak u'liYaakov. Right, we often ask ourselves in Shemona Esrei, okay, it's enough to say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the bracha to Avram Avinu. Why also to Yitzchak and to Yaakov? He says, but he did. Asher nishba lahem bach. Right, the Torah always says that God swore both to Avraham, not both, but also to Avraham, to Yitzchak and to Yaakov. Ki lo matzanu shivua liYitzchak bilti zot. Says the Ramban, we don't find that God swore to Yitzchak that he'd give him the land other than here. So he sees here Yitzchak Avinu getting a bracha from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The confirmation of Avram's bracha is itself a bracha to Yitzchak. V'ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu lihishava lekol echad min ha'avot lahodia shera'ui kol echad lichrot imo brit. Says the Ramban, it was important for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to swear individually to each of the three Avot. Again, we've seen in the Ramban before, Ma'aseh Avot, Siman Lamanim, each of the Avot was significant. None of the Avot, including Yitzchak, he wasn't just the son of Avram Avinu. He was a significant religious and spiritual and historical figure for God to have given Eretz Yisrael to him. V'shetihiyeh zchut L'chol echad omedet lefanav imzaram. And the merit of each of the Avot should stand for their children, meaning that we could claim Eretz Yisrael not just because we're the Zera Avraham, but because we're the Zera Yitzchak. And even had we not been the Zera Avraham, and even had we not been the Zera Yaakov, we would deserve Eretz Yisrael. Ki af al pi shaharishona his taspik, even though Avraham Avinu was great enough that we as his descendants are zoche to Eretz Yisrael, tosefet zechut v'chavod hu lahem. It's an additional merit to us that we have both Yitzchak and Yaakov. V'lachein amar v'zacharti et briti Yaakov, v'af et briti Yitzchak, v'af et briti Avraham eskar v'aretz eskar, ki kulam ba'alei brit le'lokim. Each of them individually was worthy enough, was significant enough for their descendants to inherit Eretz Yisrael. So it turns out for the Ramban, we have a twofold claim on Eretz Yisrael, right? The first is that we're the Zera Avraham. The second is that we're the Zera Yitzchak and the Zera Yaakov, each of which on its own would have merited us Eretz Yisrael. Kal v'chomer, the double merit that we have, inherits us Eretz Yisrael. Now the Ramban has another idea. V'yitachein shehosif lo Yitzchak b'shvua hazot sheyikayem bo ba'atzmo hashivua asher nishba la'Avraham aviv. Here God was telling Yitzchak that you will be the beneficiary of the brachos that God gave to Avraham. Sheyeh hu beracha ba'amim kasher amar la'Avraham aviv v'yitbarachu b'zaracha kol goyei ha'aretz. Right? It could have been through any other descendant of Avraham, and there were other descendants, Avraham and many sons. But no, here God says that the bracha to Avraham would be fulfilled through Yitzchak, through his son Yitzchak. V'yitbarachu b'zaracha kol goyei ha'aretz, that the blessing to all of us would come through Yitzchak. V'yeh perush hakatuv v'akimoti b'cha tashvua shenishbati la'Avraham avicha ki ata bracha ba'amim v'chein amar od bi Yaakov v'nivruchu b'cha kol mishpachot ha'adamo v'zarecha. Right? The point is, no, Yitzchak, you will be a bracha for the Amim, just like Yaakov will be a bracha for the Amim. So the bigger point here, I think, is the Ramban saying Yitzchak Avinu wasn't just the son of Avraham, right? Avraham holided Yitzchak. Yitzchak Avinu was significant in his own right, merited the brachot of Avraham Avinu in his own right, and we would have merited all the brachot through Avraham. We would have merited all the brachot that were given to the Avot through Yitzchak himself, right? So it's really just a Ramban that strongly supports this idea that Yitzchak Avinu was a significant figure and an important figure on his own, something that I think we sort of overlook. Bizman hazeh. Okay, the Torah then continues. Why does God love Avraham? Eikev asher shama Avraham b'koli vayishmor mishmarti mitzvotai chukotai v'torotai. The famous Rashi there, right? Mitzvotai chukotai v'torotai, that basically makes the point that Avraham Avinu kept all of the Torahs and all of the Rabbanans and all Harchakos and all Shnios and all the things Avraham kept already. Okay? And so I'm picking up in the middle of the Ramban after he quotes Rashi, because we're not going to have time to do the whole thing. We'll do it rather quickly. Vayishmor mishmarti ve'im kein yihiyeh kol zeh banui al dat shehaya Avraham mekayemu mishamer tatorah ad shelo nitna. Right? All this is based, says the Ramban, on Rashi's understanding that Avraham Avinu kept the entirety of the Torah before it was given, which philosophically raises issues for us. What does it mean to keep the Torah before it was given? In addition, says the Ramban, it raises parshanut questions, skipping a little bit. V'yesh lishol, im kein eich hekim Yaakov matzeva, that's an Isur D'Oraisa, a matzeva, one stone. V'nasa shtei achayot, that's an Isur D'Oraisa, he married two sisters. Uktad rabotenu arba, right? According to certain Medrashei Chazal, Bila and Zilpa were also sisters. That means he married four sisters. Va'amram nasa dodato, that's Asur, he married his aunt. Umoshe Rabbeinu Hakim Shtei Mesrei Matzeva, again, he committed a sin in making matzevot. Ve'ech efshar shiyu nohagim heter b'Torah b'ma she'asa Avraham avihem al atzmo. How could it be that the descendants of Avraham were nohag heter in things that he was makbid on? V'kavalo Hashem sachar al adavar, and God vayishmor mishmarti mitzvotai v'chukotai v'torotai. God praised Avraham for having kept all these halachos, and now his descendants stopped keeping them. The problem is the pasuk makes it clear that God loves Avraham because he's going to command his descendants to keep the Torah like he did, if he kept all of the Isurim, all the mitzvahs before they were given, how did his descendants not? Okay, the Ramban suggests a bunch of answers, including supporting Rashi's idea. But now he says, and this is really ties into the Ramban's philosophy in general, V'hanireh elai midat rabotenu shelamad Avraham Avinu haTorah kula buach hakodesh v'asak ba uvitamei mitzvoteh v'sodoteh. No, Avram learned the Torah Baruch HaKodesh and he kept the Torah. V'shamar ato kula k'mi she'eino mitzuvah v'oseh. He kept the Torah, but he wasn't in mitzuvah v'oseh, so he was in eino mitzuvah v'oseh. So he kept it on a lower level, but he still kept it. Now here comes the main point in the Ramban that I want to emphasize. Ushmirato ota haya ba'aretz bilvad. Says the Ramban, yes, Avraham Avinu kept the Torah, but he only kept it in Eretz Yisrael. Yaakov b'chutz la'aretz bilvad nasa shtei achayot. Yaakov Avinu married two sisters, it's true, but he did it in chutz la'aretz. V'chein Amram, he married his aunt, but it was in Mitzrayim. Key line, ki ha-mitzvot mishpitei elokei ha'aretz heim. Says the Ramban, because the Torah is given by God, who's elokei ha'aretz. And we saw last week, right? Elokei ha'shamayim v'aretz, says the Ramban, v'aretz doesn't mean the earth, it means Eretz Yisrael. God is the direct king over Eretz Yisrael, and therefore mitzvos are more binding in Eretz Yisrael than they are in Chutz La'aretz. Right? We saw last week, the Ramban quotes the Gemara at the end of Ksubos, Kol Adar b'Chutz La'aretz k'doma k'mi she'ein lo Elokah. Right? Here he implements that, and here he says that Avraham Avinu kept the Torah only in Eretz Yisrael because God is Mishpitei Elokei Haaretz. He is the God of Eretz Yisrael. Again, not to imply chas v'shalom that God is not the God of Chutz La'aretz. He is. But as we've seen before, and the Ramban really believes, his hashkacha is direct in Eretz Yisrael, whereas it's indirect in Chutz La'aretz, and therefore the idea that Avraham Avinu would keep the mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael only, and his descendants, Yitzchak and Yaakov, would keep the mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael only, that makes complete sense. The Ramban then is going to explain that matzevot, which we did make in Eretz Yisrael, is something that used to be beloved by God, right? Avram made a matzevah. There wasn't a problem in making a matzevah. It's only later on when matzevot were taken by the Gentiles and made into a form of avodah zarah that God decided that he used to love a matzevah, but no longer does he do so, and he's going to make it asur. Okay, that itself is kind of an interesting idea. That the line is Shesana'a achar heyota ahuva bimei ha'avot. God decided that he hated matzevot after he loved matzevot during the time of the avot. Okay, so that's the fascinating idea that yes, the avot kept kol Torah kula, but only in Eretz Yisrael. Ties into the bigger idea of the Ramban about the importance of Eretz Yisrael and how it's unique in all of the lands. But at the very end of that piece, the Ramban says something that I think speaks to all of us in a more, it's always hard to tell. The Ramban has so many layers of understanding. Here he has, 4 different understandings of whether the Avot kept the Torah or not. And finally he says at the end, he says, Va'al derech hapshat, which I think means, this is the one the Ramban really believes, but I can't prove it. Tomar sheyehei mishmarti emunat ha'elokut. When the Torah says, no, vayishmor mishmarti mitzvotai chukotai v'toratai, the Ramban is going to explain, this is a reference to monotheism. I think most of us think this. Avraham Avinu didn't keep, all the mitzvahs Torah. It's hard to understand it that way, but says the Ramban, no. He kept monotheism. Emunat ha'elokut. Shehe'emin b'shem ha'miyuchad v'shamar mishmeret zo b'libo. He kept this mishmeret, that's mishmarti. V'chalak ba al ovdei avodah zarah v'kara b'shem Hashem la'ashiv rabim la'avodato. And he disagreed with ovdei avodah zarah, and he worked hard to bring people to the belief in the one true God. Then mitzvotai k'chol asher tzivo b'lech lecha me'aretzecha. Right, mishmarti just means when God commanded Avram lech lecha me'aretzecha mi'oladcha lebeis avicha, he kept it. V'olat beno, and he brought Yitzchak to the Akedah. Vigrishat ha'ama ve'et bena, sending out Hagar. That's mishmarti. Chukotai lalechet b'darchei Hashem liyot chanun v'rachum. That's what we would call in Latin imutat yodei mahu afata. Says Ramban, God, Avram Avinu kept that. V'oset stako mishpat ulitzavot et banav ve'et bnei beito bohem. V'torotai hamila ba'atzmo uvanav u'avodav u'mitzvot bnei noach kulan she'ein Torah lohen. Right, and when it says Toratai, it means the mitzvah of Milah and the Sheva mitzvahs bnei Noach. So at the end, even though the Ramban has a really great answer for how it could be that Avram's descendants did not apparently keep the Torah, he says probably the pshat is Vayishmor mishmarti mitzvosai chukotai v'torotai. They're all the basic foundational beliefs of a Jew in the uniqueness of God, in the oneness of God, in the agreement to keep all the mitzvahs that God gave him. And there's no reason to say that Avram Avinu kept Kol Torah Kula. That seems beyond what Avram Avinu did and what we find in the Psukim. Maybe, maybe not. That's a fantastic and really, really interesting Ramban. Okay, let's go on. You go to Pasuk Chavav. Perek Chavav, Pasuk Chav Dalid. Another interesting thing. Vayera elav Adonai balayla hu vayomer anochi Elohei Avraham Avicha al tira ki idcha anochi uveirachticha v'hirbeiti et zaracha ba'avur Avraham Avdi. Okay, all these references to Avram again makes us think, for not for the first Ramban that we did today, that it's all because of Avraham and not because of Yitzchak. But here, God out of nowhere tells Yitzchak not to worry. Now, what's the context of this pasuk? Yitzchak became very, very rich in Gerar, and they kicked him out. And Avimelech kicked him out, and the Roim had a fight with him, and they kicked him out. And so says the Ramban, very reasonably, Al tirak yitcha nochi, ba'avur shehivrichu Avimelech me'alav mikina tobo. Since Avimelech kicked Yitzchak out, Lech me'imanu ki yatzamto mimenu ma'od, you're too rich, you got to get out. Mikina tombo v'gam roe Gerar ravu imo. So two bad things had just happened to Yitzchak. Hayam mityarei pen ye'esfu alav v'yakuhu uveto. So Yitzchak all of a sudden became nervous. What if all the goyim get together and join together and attack me? So says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'hivticho HaKadosh Baruch Hu shelo yira mehem v'yivarechoto. God says to him, don't worry about that. I know that you're concerned that they're going to gang up on you. It's not going to happen. Now, says the Ramban, va'az natan bilibam shehalach lefanav hamelech bichavod gadol yoter me'asher asala aviv. Now, God puts it in Avimelech's mind to go to Yitzchak and show Yitzchak great respect of the kind that he never showed Abraham. Yes, he was afraid of Sarah and Abraham, and he gave them gifts and things. But now, says the Ramban, now he comes, how do I know that? Ki ba'im fichol sar tzva'o. He came with the heads, with his general, and with all the leaders of his nation. Va'od osif lavo imo rabim meireyav. And other great people came with him. And the Torah makes the point that when Avimelech, who was one of the leaders of the time, comes with his generals and with his advisors to Yitzchak, it's an enormous sign of respect for Yitzchak. And it's a sign of respect for Yitzchak that Avraham Avinu never got. And so you see not just that God tells Yitzchak not to worry, that bad things are going to happen to him, that he's going to protect him, but more than that, he then gets Avimelech to come and show Yitzchak honor, again, making the point that Yitzchak Avinu was a significant figure and much, much more than what had happened to Avraham before him. Okay. Now, let's skip the brachot for the most part. Again, we've done it before, and it is really, really significant, and there are big points here to see. But let's go to the very end of that story. Perek Chav Zayin, Pasuk Mem Beis. Says the Torah, after Yitzchak either steals or properly gets the pasuk, gets the brachos, in Pasuk Mem Beis, the Torah says, at the very end of that story, Vayugad l'Rivka divrei Esav b'na hagadol. Right, what did Esav say? Vayomer Esav b'libo yikrevu yimei evel avi va'aharga et Yaakov achi. So it's interesting, right? He says it in his heart, And then vayugad l'Rivka divrei Esav b'na gadol v'atishlach v'atikol Yaakov b'na katan v'atomer elav hinei Esav achicha misnachem l'cha l'hargecha. So first of all, there is a Ramban which we're not going to do about how she found out. Right? If vayomer Esav b'libo, he said it only in his heart. How did she find out? But the bigger problem the Ramban wants to know is vatishlach v'atikol Yaakov. Why did she have to send Yaakov? Right? Where was Yaakov at the time? So says the Ramban, Ki haya Yaakov b'makom acher, einenu b'oel aviv v'imo. Yaakov Avinu was not in his house. He was not with his mother and his father. Ki haya mitchabe mipnei Esav achiv shayat soek alav. Right? He knew that he had done something that upset his brother Esav very, very much. Again, his getting the brachos. So he was hiding from him. And that is a very important line. He says, Vayam mitbayesh mimenu o mitpached. So part of that I understand clearly. Mitpached, he was afraid. He had pachad from Esav who might kill him. That I understand. When he says Vayam mitbayesh, I think the Ramban here is hinting at a more significant point, which is, yes, Yaakov Avinu did the right thing. And Rivka did the right thing by stealing the brachot from Esav. There's no question about it. It was the right thing. But it involved some type of dishonesty, right? This is something that exists in Jewish history, certainly, right? Even now, in the wars that we're fighting. Yes, we're fighting a just moral war. Of course we're supposed to do it. But sometimes, even when you're fighting a just or moral war, you put yourself into compromising situations. And he says Yaakov Avinu was embarrassed. He had somehow been dishonest. Again, there's no question that he did the right thing. There's no question that Am Yisrael deserved the bracha, that Yaakov deserved the bracha. However, we're going to learn that sugya. But nevertheless, there was something slightly embarrassing about how Yaakov Avinu went about it, and he was embarrassed to see Esav. So on the one hand, pshat is Esav was threatening to kill him, so he had to hide from Esav, which makes complete sense. But when the Ramban says, the word mitbayesh, I think he's hinting at, again, having done the right thing, and yet perhaps being slightly embarrassed that he had to do it and the way he had to go about doing it, which the Ramban is clear involves some dishonesty, right? Rashi sees nothing wrong whatsoever. Rashi doesn't see any problem with anything Yaakov did. But the Ramban does see a problem, even though it's the right thing. And this is seen perhaps when he says, Vayam mitbayesh mimanu, he was embarrassed to see Esav. Okay, very last one we're going to do today. It's almost the next pasuk, Perek Chav Ches, pasuk Hey. Says the Torah, Vayishlach Yitzchak et Yaakov vayelech padena Aram el Lavan ben Betuel ha'arami achi Rivka Aim Yaakov ve'esav. And there what we all recall, Rashi says, Aim Yaakov ve'esav lo yadati mamalamdenu. Of course, Rivka was the mother of Yaakov and Esav. That's the whole story. That's the whole point of the brachos. Everything we've read in the parsha is based on the fact that Rivka was the mother of Yaakov and Esav. So what's the Torah coming to teach us by saying that? So says the Ramban, Ba'avur she'amar shetziva Yitzchak et Yaakov lakachat lo isha mibnot Lavan achi imo. Since Yitzchak Avinu was now commanding Yaakov to go to Lavan, the brother of his mother, to find a wife, his kira katuv shaya gam kein achi imo shel Esav. The Torah is pointing out that not only was he the brother of the mother of Yaakov, he was the brother of the mother of Esav. V'ra'ui haya sheyitzava gam kein le'Esav. If that were the case, the Ramban says, it's a great diuk in the pasuk. What the Torah was hinting at was Yitzchak should command Esav to also go to the house of Lavan to get a wife. Aval mida'ato shebirkat Avraham tiyeli Yaakov uluzaro asakein. Now, what the point, says the Ramban, of the pasuk is that Yitzchak was now confirming that Yaakov was the rightful recipient of the bracha, and therefore Yaakov should go to the house of Lavan to find a wife, because he's the recipient of the bracha. V'hizkir ki Esav shama shetziva oto shelo yikach isha mibnot Canaan v'sheyelech el Lavan achi imo. And the Torah is telling us Esav heard the same command of Yaakov Avinu. V'hu shama la'asot ritzon aviv shelo lakachat isha mibnot Canaan ach lo asa karaui. So Esav knew this. He knew that Yaakov Avinu wanted the recipients of the bracha, one of his sons, to not marry Bnot Canaan, but he didn't go to Lavan. Ach lo asa karaui sheikach mibnot Lavan af al pishu achi imo. Right? Lavan was the uncle of both Yaakov and Esav. And Esav should have done what Yaakov did. In addition, he took additional wives, it's true, but he didn't divorce his existing wives. Because his desire overwhelmed what his father commanded him, and therefore he kept the evil wives, the Bnot Canaan that he had originally. He heard that his father Yitzchak had commanded Yaakov to go to Lavan to get a wife. He did not go to Lavan, although he got wives not from Bnot Canaan, from Yishmael and other places, but he kept the original wives, thus, compounding the sin that he had committed originally. Okay, so the Ramban, the main point here was that Lavan was not just the brother of the mother of Yaakov. Lavan was the brother of the mother of Esav also. And here Yitzchak Avinu was kilu confirming the brachos when he told Yaakov to go to the house of Lavan, but he did not tell Esav to do that. It's not a Ramban, but I remember very, very well, and we'll end with this. Rav Lichtenstein Zatzal gave a sikha on this, and he said, "V'shilach oto padan aramra el Lavan ben Betuel achi Rivka aim Yaakov ve'Esav," and he said, Yaakov there says, Rashi there says, Lo yadati ma melamdenu, and I remember it clearly, Rav Lichtenstein said, Ani yodea ma melamdenu. And he said, despite the fact that Rivka did what she did to steal the brachot in favor of Yaakov and against Esav, she remained aim Yaakov ve'Esav. Yes, it would have certainly fractured her relationship with Esav, but she still remained Esav's mother. She still remained a person who loved Esav, and she did what she did because the Jewish history demanded it of her. But nevertheless, it was painful for her. Nevertheless, it was difficult for her. We shouldn't think that Rivka did it happily, because at the end of the day, she remained Aim Yaakov ve'Esav. Okay, so today, we basically found two Rambans that support the fact that Yitzchak was great in his own right. God swore to Yitzchak that he himself deserves Eretz Yisrael. We saw a fascinating Ramban about whether the Avot, and it deserves more time and more attention, whether the Avot kept Kol Torah Kula. The Ramban says they did, but only in Eretz Yisrael. Then he suggests at the end that the pshat might be that Avraham Avinu didn't keep the whole Taryag mitzvos, but Avraham Avinu kept things related to monotheism and commands that God made of him. Okay, we saw that Yaakov Avinu was not in the house of Rivka and Yitzchak, and Rivka had to call for him. Probably, the Ramban makes clear, because he was afraid of Esav, but also some element of embarrassment that he had to be dishonest, that he had to stoop to dishonesty in order to get the brachos. And the same theme at the very end of the parsha, that Yitzchak Avinu sends Yaakov to Lavan, the brother of Rivka, Aim Yaakov ve'Esav, that means that Lavan, that Yitzchak was telling Yaakov, you are the right recipient, therefore I want you to go to the house of Lavan. It's true, he's the uncle of your brother also, but I'm commanding only you. And Esav, who overheard that, listened to his father, but only partially. He took additional wives, not from Bnot Canaan, but he didn't divorce the original ones. Okay, that's it for today. Yashkoch to everybody. Have a great, great Shabbos, and see you next week.